Your AC dies at 2 in the afternoon. Now imagine it's 50 degrees outside. Within minutes, your whole day starts reorganizing itself. You'll leave the sunlit room, look for moving air, grab a drink, sit down, and quietly decide what can wait until evening. That urge to slow down isn't weakness. Your body's already responding to the heat. Now take away the fan, the refrigerator, ice, the cold shower, even the expectation that someone will eventually make the room cool again. Ancient Egyptians still had to work, sleep, cook, travel, carry things, and raise families. So what replaced the machine? The answer is stranger than any single ancient cooling trick, because the real system may have been hiding in ordinary daily life. The moment the AC dies, heat stops being background noise. You notice the chair sitting in direct sunlight, the room that suddenly feels wrong, the short walk you don't longer feel like making. Even "I'll do it later" starts to mean something different. In severe heat, putting off physical effort can actually be part of keeping your body safe. Now move 3 feet from direct sunlight into deep shade. The air temperature may barely change, but your body is no longer absorbing the same amount of radiant heat from the sun and the hot surfaces around you. A thermometer tells you something about the air. Your skin is dealing with the entire environment. Researchers who study behavioral thermoregulation, including Flouris and Schlader, describe something humans often do before internal heat becomes dangerous. We change our behavior. We slow down, sit, look for shade, find airflow, change the time of day, get water. Avoiding heat is part of surviving heat. That changes the way we should picture ancient Egypt. Everyday Egyptian life was not one endless scene of people standing out in open desert during the hottest part of the day. Settlement and farming were concentrated around the Nile Valley, and places like Lahoun preserve mud brick homes where walls, shade, room placement, and daily routines could change how much heat actually reached the people living there. Calling ancient people tougher almost hides the clever part. Think of noon like a wave. You don't have to stop the wave. Sometimes the smartest move is simply not standing where it breaks the hardest. Most of us only rediscover this when the power goes out. Suddenly, the west-facing room matters. The shaded doorway matters. The time of day matters. Cooking can wait. The heavy chore can wait. Modern machinery usually makes those decisions invisible. If heat takes over your day, think of one word: shade, water, or air. Which one do you reach for first? That tiny answer is an ancient human behavior hiding inside an ordinary summer afternoon. They didn't have to tolerate more heat. They had to give the body less heat to tolerate. But shade only solves part of the problem. Eventually, heat still gets into the body, and every step, every lift, and every hour of physical work creates even more heat from the inside. Then the question changes: how does that heat get back out? Think about stepping out of a pool into moving air. The breeze can make wet skin feel surprisingly cold even when the air itself is warm. Nothing suddenly made the air colder. The water started leaving your skin. That feeling is the clue to one of the most important human adaptations to heat. Sweat is useful because water can evaporate from the skin. As that water changes from liquid to vapor, it carries heat away from the body. Sweating is the attempt. Evaporation is the cooling. That distinction explains why being covered in sweat doesn't automatically mean the system is working well. In moving, relatively dry air, sweat can evaporate efficiently. In hot, humid, still air, sweat may collect and drip while much of it actually evaporates. Same person, same sweat glands, very different cooling. Human thermoregulation becomes much easier to understand if you picture 3 arrows around the body. One points inward, heat coming from sunlight, hot air, and hot surfaces. A second starts inside the body, heat produced by your muscles and metabolism while walking, lifting, carrying, farming, or building. And the third has to point out. If heat can't leave fast enough, body temperature rises and ordinary physical work becomes harder and harder. That's why a breeze feels so different on sweaty skin. A fan doesn't create cold air. Moving air changes the way heat is exchanged around the body and can help sweat evaporate when conditions allow. Water matters for the same reason. Sweating uses up body water. The cooling system has a fuel supply, and that supply has to be replaced. Now ancient Egyptian material culture becomes much more interesting. Mud brick was common in ancient Egyptian homes, and archaeological sites like Lahoun preserve houses built from it. Thick earthen walls, shaded rooms, and the placement of living spaces could change how quickly and how intensely outside heat reached the people inside. That wasn't ancient air conditioning. The house didn't need to become cold. It only needed to make the body's heat problem less severe. Linen is also well documented in ancient Egyptian life. Different weaves, clothing styles, activities, and conditions would have created very different experiences, so there was no magical Egyptian heat-proof outfit. But clothing can change two things that matter enormously: how much solar radiation reaches the skin and how easily air and moisture moves around it. Now the pieces start to connect. Shade reduces radiant heat coming in. Less physical effort reduces the heat produced inside the body. Moving air can help sweat evaporate. Water keeps sweating possible. Clothing changes what reaches the skin. Shelter changes exposure over the course of hours. None of these things has to defeat the desert. Each one only has to push the heat balance a little more in the body's favor. And that might be the most important correction to the image of an ancient Egyptian simply enduring brutal heat. The clever part was never necessarily one spectacular invention. It was that several ordinary choices could each solve a different part of the same biological problem. And once every small choice is doing part of the cooling system, the next question becomes much stranger. What if ancient Egypt's real cooling system wasn't an object at all, but an entire way of living? Kill the AC one more time. At first, one machine disappears. Then, strangely, an entire layer of knowledge comes back. You notice which curtain needs to close before the afternoon sun reaches the room, which window actually helps, and which one just lets hot air in, whether cooking right now is a terrible idea, which floor feels cooler, where the water is, whether the heavy chore can wait a couple of hours. None of those choices is an air conditioner, but together they start doing pieces of the same job. That's the useful idea behind distributed adaptation. In plain English, one survival problem can be spread across an entire way of life. The house takes one piece, shade takes another, clothing changes how much heat reaches the skin and how moisture moves around it. Water replaces what you lose through sweating. Air movement can help evaporation work more effectively. Changing when or how hard you work changes how much heat your muscles produce from the inside, and the body handles whatever's left. The clever part is almost disappointingly ordinary. No single object has to defeat the desert. Several small things just have to push the body's heat balance in the right direction. That helps explain why archaeological evidence from ordinary Egyptian settlements matters so much. Places like Lahoun preserve mud brick homes rather than monumental stone world most people picture when they hear ancient Egypt. Mud brick was not an ancient refrigerator, but thick earthen walls have thermal mass. They can slow changes in indoor temperature and partly shield the body from the full intensity of the outdoor environment. A shaded room is not cold. It is simply taking in less radiant heat. A loose garment is not a cooling machine, but it can still change sun exposure, airflow, and evaporation around the skin. A water jar is not technology in the same sense as a compressor, but access to water keeps sweating possible. Each detail looks unimpressive on its own. Put them all around one human body and the story changes. The body does not have to solve the entire heat problem by itself. Modern climate control makes this surprisingly hard to notice. Set a thermostat to 72 degrees and whole categories of environmental information become optional. The west-facing wall? Mostly irrelevant. The hottest hour of the day? Work through it. The kitchen heating up the house? Turn the AC down. The direction of the breeze? The machine doesn't care. You can even close every window and wear clothes chosen for style instead of climate, while a mechanical system constantly adjusts the air around you. That is an extraordinary achievement, but it also creates a strange kind of blindness. We start comparing our machine with their lack of a machine. That's not the real comparison. The better comparison is our entire cooling infrastructure versus their entire heat management system. Now imagine the power stays off for 24 hours during a serious heat wave. Watch how quickly the supposedly modern person changes. They move toward shade. They stop walking unnecessarily. They drink more. They open one window and close another. They avoid the hottest room. They wait until evening to do something strenuous. Nobody taught them anything ancient. The human animal simply becomes easier to see when the infrastructure disappears. And that correction matters because ancient Egyptians were not another kind of human. They lived inside a different system built around the same kind of body. That gives us three distinctions worth remembering: Heat tolerance is not the same as heat exposure. Sweating is not the same as cooling. And one invention is not the same as an entire survival system. Calling ancient people tougher can actually make them seem less capable than they really were. Toughness sounds like standing there and successfully suffering through it. Adaptation is more active. It means noticing what the environment keeps doing to the body, then changing where, when, and how life happens around that problem. The difference is subtle, but it changes the entire thumbnail. The ancient Egyptian standing in brutal heat did not necessarily survive because his body could tolerate something yours cannot. He may have survived because much of daily life was already reducing, delaying, redirecting, or avoiding parts of that heat before his body had to absorb the full cost. And the modern person on the other half of the image is not weak. Take away the machine and within minutes, the same old behaviors start coming back. Shade, water, air, less effort, a later hour. The body did not become modern when air conditioning appeared. The infrastructure around it did. So the next time heat changes what you do, notice what happens in those first few seconds. That tiny decision may be older than almost everything else in the room around you. And if this changed the way you picture ancient survival, tell me which ancient survival question we should explore next. Because once one modern machine can hide this many old human decisions, the stranger question is how many other primitive behaviors only look primitive because we've forgotten the problem they were solving.